Donald Trump doesn't inspire people to follow. He threatens people. He lies to people. He uses tactics that are authoritarian, that are not leadership. So I think, I wrote about these 17 words because starting with him talking about leadership and then ending with constitutional rule of law, it just was one big lie.
You wrote in the Democracy Docket newsletter today, which I encourage everybody to subscribe to.
Thank you.
About the responsibility of citizens. This is what you write. We live in the here and now. The responsibility to prevent the worst outcomes rests with us, lawyers, journalists, government officials, and citizens alike, to insist that the rule of law is not subject to the whims of any one man. Fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law must be as dear to us as it is meaningless to Trump. I think that there are a large swath of people in this country that not only agree with what you're saying, but believe that and have been trying to live that, especially in the last couple of months, frankly, of that ended 25 going into 2026. But then I do think that there's a segment of people in this country that are like, I'm just trying to get through. And so these words, Mark, are, I think, critical because two things are happening right now. One is that there's segments of the population trying to claw back the power via protest, trying to hold the government accountable, whether that protest is actually on the streets or if it's in the courtroom, so on and so forth. But the administration is also escalating. And I do think it's important to note that it's going to get a little worse from the administration perspective before it gets better. But the people have to hold on to the sentiment that you wrote in the newsletter today.
Yeah, and I think it's important to distinguish between who are the people who are standing up and who are the people who are just trying to get by. Mm-hmm. I'd have a lot more sympathy if the people who were standing up were the powerful, were the people who have all of the privileges and who are the elites. And the people who are just trying to get by were the people who are every day living paycheck to paycheck and don't have that power. But it's actually the reverse that we're seeing. Look at who I singled out, the lawyers, the journalists, the corporate leaders. I'd add to that, by the way, the entertainers. We saw at the Golden Globes a very muted response by people who have all of the advantages in life. Just like we are watching in Minneapolis, the people with, of everyday Americans standing up. But where's Target Corporation? Which is headquartered in Minneapolis? Where's 3M, which is headquartered in Minneapolis? Where are the big law firms that, when it was fashionable in 2017, sent legions of associates to the airports? And now that it's non-fashionable, they're not sending anyone to Minneapolis. We are a legal profession that are now relying on citizens with cell phones and whistles and informal trainings to be legal observers. And every time I hear that term, legal observers, applied to ordinary citizens, I ask myself, where are the lawyers? Why aren't they the legal observers? Why aren't the big law firms sending people to be legal observers? And then, of course, outside of a handful of folks like you, and frankly, Nicole Wallace and a lot of people on MS Now, a lot of legacy media, they're just kind of going along for the ride too. CBS is not, winning any awards for courage. ABC News is not winning any awards for standing up. And so it is sad that it is actually the most powerful institutions and the most powerful Americans who are doing so little when we are watching the heroicism of everyday Americans.
Amen, amen, and amen. I could not agree more with the way you frame that and the way you lay out those parts of our culture, our society, that should be leaning into this moment. Instead, they're retreating from it, and in an embarrassing way. In a way that is so telling and so difficult, makes it so much more difficult for everyday folks out there, which is why they when we're out and about, they say to us, what can we do? What can we do? Because they don't see that kind of organizing energy like I talked about today, except from everyday folks, not from the institutions that could help. Which brings me to this bottom line point with you, Mark. The framing of this moment for me is the arrogance of unchecked power. Simone talks a lot about it. Alicia reports on it quite a bit. And so we know how these storylines develop and how they play out. The desire to build a police state to enforce the rule that's in his head. And by that, I mean, whatever he decides is punishable today, that's what they'll go after. Whatever he decides is not constitutional, that's what he goes after. So all of this brings me to this point when I hear Donald Trump say this about weaponization of the DOJ. Let's take a listen.
Ended Joe Biden's weaponization of our government and removed his handpicked radical left Marxist prosecutors from the Department of Justice, like deranged Jack Smith. He's a sick son of a bitch. Then if I suggest that somebody may be guilty of a terrible crime, oh, he's weaponizing government. Trump is weaponizing government. It's terrible. Can you imagine? But what they did to me, nobody ever went through what I went through. And here I am in a place called the White House. It's a beautiful place. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah, who would have thought? Yeah, a lot of us warned about this moment happening. But the fact, two things. One, his comments about Jack Smith, I'll just leave it at it's unbecoming a president of the United States. And point number two, when he says, you know, what they did to me, nobody ever went through what I went through, is because no president has ever crimed the way you have. No president has ever given them the incentive to impeach you, not once, boo, but twice. Twice. What does that say about you? I mean, you got to put a whole lot of stuff together, Mark, to do that twice. So what does this, when you look at this framing in the context of this authoritarian push, as you noted, to control the legal outcome of things, how do we go forward from this, knowing what we know now and seeing this play out the way it has a year later?
Yeah, so I think we first start acknowledging where we are, which is only 1 year in, right? There are 3 more years of this, and he's not getting better. Like, he's getting worse. Like, even within the deranged sentence structures, he's getting worse. Within the authoritarianism, he's getting worse. I mean, he is right now picking a fight with NATO over Greenland. And I think the way we are going to get through this is if we all just speak the truth. And we don't hold back, and we don't try to spare feelings, and we don't try to sugarcoat it. You know, I mean, there was a lot of ink spilled over whether or not Joe Biden confused the names of two leaders. And yet, here we are watching that performance. Where are the people who spilled all that ink? Where are the journalists writing books about Joe Biden? Where are they today when you are getting that from Donald Trump? And the answer is they're nowhere. So it is left to the rest of us to just every day speak up about it. I mean, you know, Simone, you started with a piece I wrote in Democracy Docket. I am a busy lawyer. Like, I am litigating. My law firm has 80 cases in court, but I find myself almost every day writing because I need to be part of the people who are documenting what we are seeing. Just like you are, and Michael is, and Alicia are. Like, we need to document what is happening, both to persuade people in the here and now, but also for future generations to know that there were people at this time in history who were calling this out for what it is and speaking the truth.